Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
There's a moment, and if you felt it, you know exactly what I'm talking about, where you're standing in the middle of your own life and you quietly start looking for the door. Not because you want to leave, not because you're ungrateful, but because something deep inside you, something that's been whispering for years, finally gets loud enough that you can't pretend you didn't hear it. You're tired. Not the kind of tired that a good night's sleep fixes. This is bone tired, soul tired. The kind of exhaustion that sits behind your eyes and lives in your chest and follows you into rooms full of people who love you and somehow makes you feel more alone anyway. Maybe it happened at the kitchen table. Maybe it was a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic. Just the ordinary weight of an ordinary morning. And suddenly you thought, is this it? Is this really all there is left? And then came the guilt. Because you know better, don't you? You've built things, raised people, survived things that would have broken someone else in half. You have a list of blessings you could recite in your sleep. So why does it feel like you've been living inside someone else's life? Smiling in all the right places, showing up, carrying the weight, while the real you has been standing at a window, looking out, wondering what it would feel like to finally exhale. That's the exit sign. And it doesn't always look the way you'd expect. Sometimes the exit sign isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It's not a breakdown in a parking lot, though sometimes it is that too. Sometimes it's quieter. It's you rearranging the dishwasher at 11 o'clock at night. Because if you stop moving, something will catch up with you. It's you nodding along in a conversation while a voice in the back of your mind is somewhere else entirely. Somewhere greener, somewhere lighter, somewhere that doesn't have a schedule or a list of people who need something from you. It's the slow, creeping realization that you've spent so many years being necessary that you've forgotten how to simply be. Here's what nobody tells you about reaching your 50s and 60s and beyond. That this chapter, the one the world kind of quietly ignores, is actually one of the most psychologically complex seasons of a human life. You're not just aging, you're reckoning. You're standing at the crossroads of everything you were told you should want and everything you've discovered you actually feel. And those two things don't always live in the same house. You've done the caregiving, or you're still in the thick of it. You've watched parents become fragile. You've watched children become strangers who sometimes remember to call. You've watched marriages either deepen into something beautiful or quietly hollow out from the inside. You've looked in the mirror and met a face that surprised you. Not because it's old, but because it carries so much story, and so few people ever actually ask about it. And maybe the hardest part, the part that stings in that particular way that only the truth can sting, is this: somewhere along the way, you got really, really good at making sure everyone else was okay. And that skill, that beautiful, generous, self-sacrificing skill, cost you something. It cost you the habit of checking in with yourself. It cost you the language to describe your own need. It cost you permission to want something just for you. So you started looking for exit signs, not from life itself. Please hear me on that. But from the version of life that no longer fits. From the roles that have calcified into identity. From the relationships that drain without ever filling back up. From the silence that got too comfortable and the noise that got too exhausting. From the woman you performed for decades because she was safe and she was expected and she was good. But she wasn't always whole. That's where we begin. Not at the end of something, at the threshold. Because that exit sign you keep seeing, it's not a warning. It's not a symptom of something broken in you. It's actually the most alive part of you, refusing to be ignored any longer. It's your soul, doing what souls do when they've been patient long enough. It's knocking. And somewhere underneath all the noise and the obligation and the beautiful, exhausting life you've built, you hear it. You've always heard it. You just haven't known yet whether you were allowed to answer. You are. And we're going to figure out what's on the other side of that door together. Let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with it for a moment before you answer. When was the last time someone asked how you were doing and actually waited for the real answer? Not the reflexive, I'm fine, just tired answer. Not the gracious deflection you've perfected over decades of being the strong one. The real answer. The one that lives 3 layers down. Underneath the capable and the composed and the always holding it together. The one that might shake a little if it ever found its way out into the open air. If you're struggling to remember, that silence is telling you something important. Here's what I've come to understand after years of sitting with women in the quiet wreckage of lives that looked perfectly fine from the outside. The exit sign doesn't appear overnight. It doesn't just show up one day out of nowhere, tapping you on the shoulder like some uninvited guest. No, it's been built. Slowly, quietly. Brick by invisible brick laid down over years, sometimes over a lifetime, of a very particular kind of loss that doesn't have a funeral, doesn't get a casserole from the neighbors, doesn't get acknowledged in any of the ways that real grief does. It's the loss of yourself, piece by piece, in increments so small you didn't even feel them going. It started early for most of us, earlier than we realize. Think about the messages you absorbed, not the ones anyone said out loud necessarily, but the ones that lived in the air of the households and communities you grew up in. The ones that taught you, before you were old enough to question them, what a good woman was. What she did, what she didn't ask for, how much space she was allowed to take up, how loudly she was permitted to want things. Be helpful. Be pleasant. Don't be difficult. Don't be too much. Make sure everyone at the table is fed before you sit down. Make sure everyone in the room is comfortable before you consider your own comfort. Make sure everyone else's needs are visible and tended to, and yours, well, yours can wait. Yours can always wait, and you learned that lesson beautifully. God, did you learn it? You became extraordinary at it. You became the woman people counted on, the one they called in a crisis, the one who knew what to do and did it without being asked. You became indispensable. And for a long time, maybe that felt like love. Maybe that felt like purpose. Maybe being needed was the closest thing to being seen that you knew how to accept. But here's the wound underneath the wound. The thing we don't say out loud enough, indispensable, is not the same as cherished. Being needed is not the same as being known. Carrying everyone else doesn't mean anyone is carrying you. And somewhere in the accumulated weight of all those years of giving and managing and holding and fixing, you started to disappear, not all at once, just in small, quiet ways. You stopped finishing sentences about what you wanted because no one seemed particularly curious about the ending. You stopped making plans that were just for you because something always needed your attention first. You stopped listening to that inner voice, that particular, specific, irreplaceable voice that is yours and only yours, because she kept getting interrupted, and eventually she just got quieter. That's the deeper wound. Not the circumstances of your life, though those matter. Not the relationships or the disappointments or the losses, though those are real and they are heavy. The deeper wound is the long, slow silencing of your own interior life. The way you learned, were taught, to be a stranger to your own needs. And now you're here. Maybe 50-something. Maybe 60-something. Maybe looking at 70 and feeling a complicated mixture of things that nobody's greeting cards ever quite capture. And the life you've built, it may be full, it may even be beautiful in many ways, but something in you knows. Something in you has always known. You've been living on the surface of yourself, and the deeper water, the real you, the uncensored you, the you that has opinions and longings and a specific kind of humor and a dream or two that never quite got its chance. She's been down there, waiting. Patient in the way that only things with deep roots can be patient. The H you feel, that's her, reaching up. Now I want to be honest with you here, because you deserve honesty more than you deserve comfort. And I think on some level you already know the difference. Some of what brought you to this threshold was circumstances, things that happened to you, relationships that took more than they gave, grief that arrived in forms no one prepared you for, a body that started speaking a different language than it used to, a world that shifted in ways that left you feeling slightly out of place in your own story. But some of it, and I say this not to assign blame, but to hand you back your power. Some of it was the slow accumulation of choices made from a scarcity of self-worth, staying too long in places that diminished you because leaving felt selfish, swallowing words that deserved to be spoken because keeping the peace felt more important than keeping your integrity, shrinking, accommodating, disappearing by degrees, not because you were weak. Please understand that. The women who shrink themselves into the shape of everyone else's comfort aren't weak. They are often the strongest people in any room. They shrink because somewhere, sometime, they learned that their full size wasn't safe. That wanting things was dangerous. That being too much of themselves risked losing love, or approval, or belonging. And belonging, oh, belonging, that's a need so ancient and so primal that we'll pay almost anything to keep it, even ourselves. But here's where the story starts to shift. Here's where the exit sign stops being a source of shame or confusion or quiet panic and starts becoming something else entirely. It starts becoming a compass. Because the fact that you can feel this, the restlessness, the longing, the low hum of something has to change, means that something in you is still vital, still awake, still refusing. And that refusal, that is not your problem. That is your power. The wound is real. The years are real. The losses of time, of self, of paths not taken are real, and they deserve to be grieved. Truly grieved, not bypassed with gratitude and positive thinking and the spiritual bypassing we're so often handed as women of a certain generation. But the wound is also a door, and the door is already open. There's a particular kind of mourning that some women describe. And when they do, there's always this pause before the words come, like they're reaching for something they've never quite had language for before. It's not a dramatic mourning. Nothing extraordinary happened. Nobody called with news. The sun came up the way it always does. But something was different. Something had shifted in the night. The way furniture sometimes looks different in a room you've always known. And you can't identify exactly what moved, but you feel it. And for the first time in a long time, maybe in years, you woke up and your very first thought wasn't about someone else. It was about you, what you needed, what you wanted the day to feel like, what you were hungry for, not in the kitchen sense, but in the soul sense. That particular, almost forgotten hunger that belongs to no one else. And instead of immediately pushing it aside the way you've trained yourself to do, instead of cataloging everyone else's needs before your own feet hit the floor, you let yourself feel it for a moment. Just a moment. Maybe 30 seconds. Maybe a minute. But you let it be there. That, right there, is the turning. That's what coming back to yourself actually looks like. Not a grand transformation, not a vision quest or a reinvention or a dramatic departure from everything you've built. It's 30 seconds of radical self, acknowledgement on an ordinary Tuesday morning. It's the decision, quiet, almost invisible, made somewhere deep in the chest rather than the head, that you count to. Don't underestimate that. Don't let its smallness fool you. That 30 seconds is seismic. I want to talk about something that doesn't get discussed honestly enough in the conversations we have about women in this season of life. We talk a lot about what to do. The next chapter, the bucket list, the reinvention, the purpose-driven second half. And those things matter, they genuinely do. But we skip over the harder, quieter, more necessary work that has to happen before any of that becomes real. The work of grieving what was. Because here's the thing about coming back to yourself. It requires acknowledging, fully and without flinching, what you left behind along the way. The dreams you set down because the timing was never right. The version of yourself that existed before the roles accumulated. Before you were someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's caretaker, someone's anchor. The creative longings that got shelved. The friendships that quietly faded under the weight of busy years. The parts of your personality, the bold parts, the irreverent parts, the fiercely opinionated and deliciously complicated parts that got sanded down to a smoother, more manageable version of you. Grief isn't only for people, it's for lost selves too. And if you skip the grief, if you jump straight from the H to the action plan, you'll find yourself running toward a new life while still secretly carrying the unprocessed weight of the old one. You'll find yourself recreating the same patterns in different rooms, still overgiving, still over-explaining, still shrinking, still waiting for permission that no one is ever going to hand you because it was never theirs to give. The permission was always yours. Sit with that for a second. So what does the actual turning look like? What are the real, honest, unglamorous signs that a woman is beginning to come back to herself? Not performing a comeback. Not chasing someone else's vision of awakening, but genuinely, organically finding her way back to her own interior. It looks like getting quieter before she gets louder. It looks like starting to notice the difference between what she actually feels and what she thinks she should feel. That distinction sounds small. It isn't. For women who've spent decades performing emotional states that were expected of them. The cheerfulness, the patience, the uncomplicated gratitude, learning to recognize your own authentic emotional weather is genuinely revolutionary. It looks like starting to disappoint people, gently, lovingly, but still disappointing them, saying no to things that were always a quiet yes held together by obligation and fear. Letting some balls drop that you've been told were yours to carry, when really they were just conveniently placed in your arms by people who trusted you never to put them down. It looks like reclaiming something small and specific that is purely, selfishly, joyfully yours. Not because it serves a purpose. Not because it makes you a better mother or a grandmother or partner or friend, but because it makes your heart feel like it has room in it again. A walk that's just a walk. A book that isn't educational or self-improving, but simply transporting. A creative pursuit that has no audience and no product and no justification beyond the fact that when you're doing it, you feel like yourself. It looks like starting to tolerate your own company. Not just tolerate, enjoy. This is bigger than it sounds for women who have been surrounded by need and noise for decades. Learning to be alone without immediately filling the silence with productivity or distraction. Letting the quiet be a sanctuary instead of a threat. And it looks like something else too. Something that might surprise you. It looks like anger. Not the explosive, destructive kind. Though honestly, sometimes it's that too, and that's okay, but more often it's a quieter anger. A slow burning, clarifying, useful anger. The kind that arrives when you finally stop explaining away the things that have hurt you and simply feel the fact that they hurt. Anger in a woman who has been endlessly accommodating is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It's a sign that something has gone right. It's the immune system of the soul finally activating. It's the boundary finder, the truth teller, the part of you that knows your worth and is done pretending otherwise. Let yourself be a little angry. You've earned it. Just don't let it become your permanent address. Use it as fuel. Here's what I know about women in this season who do the work, who actually turn toward themselves instead of away, who sit in the grief and the anger and the confusion and the gorgeous, terrifying freedom of starting to want things again. They don't become different people. That's not what happens. They don't shed their history or their relationships or the lives they've built. They don't run away, though sometimes the exit sign points toward a real and necessary leaving of certain things. What they do is deeper and more lasting than any external change. They become more themselves. They come back to the version of themselves that existed before the world got its hands on them and started editing. They find her, maybe a little older, maybe a little worn, but absolutely intact, absolutely alive, waiting patiently in the sanctuary of their own interior. And they say, finally, after all this time, I see you. I'm sorry it took so long, I'm here now. And that reunion, that quiet, private, enormously significant reunion between a woman and her own soul, that changes everything. I want to tell you about a woman I know. She's not famous. She didn't write a memoir or start a movement or appear on a stage somewhere to tell her story to thousands of people. She's ordinary in all the ways that matter. She has a kitchen that needs cleaning and a body that aches in the mornings and a complicated relationship with at least one person she loves deeply and doesn't always understand. She has regrets. She has unfinished business with her own past. She has days where the old weight comes back and sits on her chest like it never left. But she also has something she didn't have 5 years ago. She has herself. Not a perfected version. Not a healed and whole and radiantly transformed version that belongs on a wellness magazine cover. Just herself. Honest and imperfect and present. A woman who has learned, slowly, imperfectly, with significant backsliding, to treat her own inner life with the same tenderness she spent decades lavishing on everyone else's. A woman who has learned that the exit sign she spent years half dreading, half longing for, wasn't pointing toward escape. It was pointing toward arrival. That's the thing nobody tells you when you're standing at the threshold, looking at that sign with a heart full of guilt and longing and confusion. You think it means you're leaving. You think wanting out means something is wrong with you, with your gratitude, with your love, with your character. You've been taught, in 1,000 subtle and not so subtle ways, that a good woman stays present, stays patient, stays contained within the boundaries of what's expected and what's needed and what keeps everything running smoothly. But the exit sign was never asking you to abandon your life. It was asking you to stop abandoning yourself inside it. There is a difference, a profound, life-altering, soul-saving difference between leaving your life and expanding it, between running away from who you've been and gently, deliberately walking toward who you still have time to become. And time, let's talk about time for a moment, because I know it sits heavy in the minds of women in this season, this beautiful and complicated season that the world tends to treat as an ending when it is anything but. You are not running out of time. I know that's not what the culture tells you. I know the messages you absorb daily about visibility and relevance and the particular cruelty of watching the world seem to turn its attention toward younger faces, younger voices, younger versions of everything you once were. I know how that lands. I know the specific sting of feeling like the story is wrapping up when you still have so much you haven't said. But here is the quiet truth that the noise tends to drown out. The women who do the deepest, most luminous, most meaningful living of their entire lives, they often do it here, in this chapter. The one that starts when the performance ends. The one that begins when there's finally nothing left to prove and no one left to perform for, and the only question that remains is the most important one you've ever been asked. Who are you when it's just you? That question used to feel terrifying, didn't it? Maybe it still does a little. That's okay. Terror and readiness often arrive together. They're not opposites, they're travel companions. And the fact that you're still here, still listening, still willing to sit inside this conversation rather than click away to something easier and more comfortable, that tells me everything about your readiness. You are more ready than you know. So let's talk about what actually waits on the other side of that door. Not in abstract, inspirational terms. I promised you a real conversation, and I intend to keep that promise, concretely, honestly. What does life look and feel like for a woman who has walked through her own exit sign and discovered it was a doorway all along? It feels quieter. Not empty, quieter. There's a distinction there that matters enormously. The noise that falls away isn't joy or connection or love. It's the static, the low-level hum of constant self-monitoring, of perpetual performance, of the exhausting internal narrator who spent decades evaluating your every move through the eyes of everyone else in the room. When she finally goes quiet, and she does go quiet with time and practice and patience, what you're left with isn't loneliness, it's spaciousness. Room to think your own thoughts, to